Right, so the concealed zip foot, it's got 2 grooves in it. You see those 2 grooves? And the idea of the grooves is that unbends, pass my zip, Ella, unbends the teeth as it sews. So that's what we're going to refer to as the right side of the zip. Okay, so when it's done up, it's just the pendant side and you can't see the teeth. We're going to refer to that as the right side. Okay, so you work with your zip undone. And when we put, it doesn't matter which way side you work. So we've got our garment and you've got, you either press the seam allowance or just draw your seam allowance on it. Alright, it's just easier for reference. So you could have that as a pressed line, fold that in, and then when you unfold it, you've got the crease line. But you have to remember, obviously your garment's all seam neatened, and you're working flat. You're not working with the seam allowance bent. It has to be flat. So you put the zip right sides together. So you're going to flip it over so you can see the teeth, and you line it up so that the teeth go onto the edge of the onto where the seam allowance, where you're going to sew it. So there is a gap. If you've got a 1.5 centimetre seam, there is going to be about 1/4 of an inch, 7mm gap from the edge of the zip tape to the edge of the garment. You need the seam to be wide. You could, if you wanted to, just sew the zip tape down to secure it first of all. But I'm not going to do that. So we're going to switch to the concealed zip foot. Right, and it's very good because it just helps. You want to sew it so that uncurls a little bit and it goes 90 degrees. So it's curled over. You want it to be 90 degrees, and when it goes in, that needs to stand up so it's 90 degrees in that foot, and it uncurls it as it sews with the concealed zip foot. When you put it through, it hasn't got the slot, so you need to get the thread underneath. A bit awkward, because otherwise it will just all get in the way when you're sewing. So you've got your garment, you can pin your zip in. You just need to remember it's right sides together. So actually looking at it, what you've got, if you're working on your back or your left hand side, you're putting the right hand side of the zip, and you see, onto that. So when it's sewn in, it folds back and curls, and then the zip flips over. So that's what you have to remember, but you're working on it flat. So if you refer to it as right sides together, it makes a bit more sense. There's this plastic bit at the top, and it doesn't like that. So for some reason, if you start in front of it and then reverse and then go forward, it seems to behave a bit better than just sewing on the spot and eating everything up. So you can see I slightly uncurl it as I stand and lower the foot so it stands upright. The needle, put your needle down, and then you can take your pin out. You can tack them in if you want to, but obviously I would prefer you just learn to sew. So normal straight stitch, start going forward like normal sewing. You might need to put it a little bit to get over that, tease it, manipulation. You might need to give it a bit of assistance to go around that first bit. Now when you sew the concealed zip in, it has a tendency to gather as it sews. The feed dogs tend to gather the fabric underneath, so you need to secure it front and back or have it pinned in place on your seam allowance. And there might need to be a little bit of assistance, but you mustn't pull the fabric through. It's all about feeling it and feeding it. Now you can see I haven't ironed this one flat, so this is curled over, and as it's sewing, it's straightening and standing up at 90 degrees, and it's sewing on that line on the concealed zip foot. Now the reason I've told you to buy a zip that's 2.5 centimetres or an inch longer is because you can see you can't get in anywhere near because of the zip pull. So you can only go as far. Make sure it doesn't bend off from the seam allowance. It has to stay at the seam allowance. So you get as near as you can, and it will just stop unfolding, and then reverse a few stitches and then back again, and then take your work out. So there you can see that's your first side sewn in. Okay, and then if you do your zip up, it will curl over, and you can see how beautifully and close that is to the teeth. Alright, and you've got it sewn on your seam allowance. If you're using the concealed zip foot, if you've got any seams or checks or something like that, you want to do your zip up and then mark it across. So you could do that with tailor's chalk, or you could just put a little notch, a snip in. But if you had a check there, you'd want to make sure that they're balanced. So you could just do a little snip with your scissors onto the other side of the zip tape. So then when you undo it, because you always work with your zip undone, when you then undo it and again flip it over, so you're going to get your skirt and flip that zip over right sides together. Okay, if you're then going to put this back in and you've got checks, you've got that marker to line it up with the other side of the garment, so it's all level. And if you're using the concealed zip foot, all that would happen is that you will stand it up again and then sew it on the other side just like you did on the way down.